Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Greetings and salutations, and welcome back to JavaScript in Metaphors. So, today we are going to get started on this course, and the way I want to get started is to actually go ahead and build out an application. And that's because when I started learning how to do this, all the courses that I did was just going through the basics of JavaScript from a very fundamental point of view. And there's nothing wrong with that per se, but it did give me kind of a disconnect between what I was learning and what I was trying to achieve. And mostly, I just want to build really cool stuff. And I didn't understand a lot of the concepts that I was learning. So, what I really wanted and what I would like to uh, do in this course is to actually build an app first and then use the application as kind of a starting point for learning some of these concepts. Because I think that once you kind of see the use of a concept and then get it explain that concept in the context of an actual application afterwards, it makes it a lot easier to understand. So that's what we are going to be doing, and what we'll be building out in this introduction is this chat application. And let's just go ahead and get started on that. I've prepared a few small things just to speed it up a little bit, but most of it we're going to be building completely from scratch using only vanilla JavaScript. All right, so that should be really interesting. And for me as well, because I build most of my apps using frameworks nowadays. And it's always good to just get back to the roots a little bit and feel what you can do with just plain JavaScript. So that should be fun. So let's go ahead and just see what we have to get started with. And I have a starting setup here in my code editor. Let me go ahead and blow this up a little bit. Yeah, I think that's good enough, isn't it? Then let's go ahead and see what we have. So we have this index HTML file. We have a CSS file that basically just inputs some fonts and sets margin and padding to be 0 on the body. And then we have a data file. So this data file is basically just representing what's in our sketch file. So you can see we have contacts, they have a name, they have an image URL, and they have an ID. So if we go ahead and go to our sketch file, on the left-hand side here, we have this sidebar with our contacts. And they have a name and an image, and then they also have, the last message. And in our data here, we split that up. So basically, this contacts variable holds all of the contacts data, and then we have a messages variable that holds all of the messages for a given contact. Now, I know a lot of this is going to fly right over your head if you're new to this, and that's completely fine. This is just a starting point. I don't expect you to understand anything that's going on here or what these things are. We're just going to go through it here in this beginning episodes, and then we are going to use this as a starting point to explain it. So if you don't keep up, if you don't feel like you're getting anything out of it, just keep on going, and then once we get to the part where we explain the concepts, they will hopefully all make sense to you. But basically, we just have a data set here, and the programming language is going to take that data and translate it into something that we see on the screen. So just keep that in mind, that using the programming language, we are going to take the data and we're going to create something visual. So we have an assets folder here as well. We just have a few icons that we're going to be using, and we have the fonts that we kind of source through our index CSS file. So if we now open this up and we see what we have, let's go ahead and bring that over. We'll see that this is kind of the starting point. So basically just an empty shell right now, but that's what we're here to fix. So let's go ahead and get started on building out this chat application. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a source directory, and we'll create an index.js file. Then in our HTML file, we'll go ahead and we'll source that script. We'll make sure we bring that in, say modules. Let's go ahead and check that out real quick. Script tag. So we want to have the ability to import modules, and I know we need to use a type module, it looks like. Type module. So let's go ahead and do type module. And let's go ahead and make sure we close that correctly. And now we should have our script up and running. And if we do console log just to test, and we go ahead and we go back to our browser and we hit refresh in this file here, we now get blocked by course, which is fine as well. So let's go ahead and do a version of this where we actually just serve this up through an HTTP server. So we'll do Python and we'll serve that on port 8000. And let's go now to localhost 8000. We should get the same result. And now we have the test from our JavaScript here. Awesome. So now we have initialized our script. Next thing we need to do is to take a look at our sketch file. And we want to start building out this application here. So let's get started with getting the background on the body right, and then we'll create a shell for the entire application. And I think a sensible place to start might be to start on the sidebar here. So let's go ahead and do that. And we'll head back to our application and our code editor. So first, we are going to create an element in our index HTML page. And instead of saying hello world, we'll say div, and we'll give that a class of chat app root. So this will be the element where we actually attach our JavaScript. So our JavaScript needs to attach to something, and then once it has a real element, then inside of that element it can start building the application. So that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to get this element right here, this div with the class of chat app root, and then what we want to do is we want to use JavaScript to build out the rest of our application inside of here. So we're going to be using JavaScript to create all of the HTML markup that we need to display the application. So let's go ahead and see if we can't get a hold of this element here. in our index.js file. So we'll say const root element, say document query selector, and the way we select this element is by giving the query selector the class of the element we want to select. And let's go ahead and create an h1 just to get back to, if we refresh now, I think, yeah, this is still going to be here because we didn't restart our server. But if we restart it, now this should be gone. And we also need to save our files, otherwise nothing ever going to happen. But if we do that, then now you can see that the HTML here is gone. So let's try and recreate that with JavaScript. So if we say const h1 equals document create element h1, and we say h1 text content equals hello world, then we'll say root element and child, and we'll give it the h1. So there, now if we refresh, we have the same result. So that's good. We know that now we have successfully retrieved the element that we created. So in the body, we see that we have the div with the class of chat app root, which is the root element. And then inside of that is our hello world. So now we can begin to work with this. So let's go ahead and just do a few more things. I want to go to our CSS. I want to say that the body has a background color, and we'll get that from Sketch. And that's going to be this color right here. Copy that over, give that hex color there. And we'll say display flex, justify content center, and align items center. So what this will do is that it'll kind of center anything that is inside of this container. So we'll give the body a min height of 100, viewport height as well. So that'll make the body as high as the window here. So if we refresh now, we'll see that the text is now moved to the middle of the screen, and we have the background color that's slightly more gray than what we had before. Excellent. So now let's go ahead and get started on building the actual chat application. So we'll delete this. This was just a little test. And we'll say const chat, or we'll say app container. Say document create element div, and we'll say app container class list add, and we'll say app container. Now let's go ahead and see in Sketch what we need. So if we look at this app, we can see that, all right, we need one container that's going to go around the whole thing. And then we need one container inside of that that's going to, I can just copy and paste this. We need one container inside of that that's going to represent this sidebar. So just trying to draw the big lines here now. And then if we copy that as well, whoops, what I wanted. All right. So if we take this, oh, come on. All right. Go ahead and grab one of these instead. So we need one for the sidebar. We need one container for this chat section. go ahead and see if we can't make it red and move it up a little bit so that we can see the borders. So, all right, that'll be a container. This will be a container. And then we're going to have a container around the sidebar as well. That'll kind of be the main containers here, and then obviously the each of these elements need their own container as well. But let's just get started building out this overall HTML structure. So we'll head to our editor. So we have the app container, that's the overall container. And then we'll create a sidebar container. That's going to be, we'll create an aside. And we'll do sidebar container, class list, add. And we'll go ahead and we'll call that sidebar container, excuse me. And then we'll go ahead and we'll say main content. And that's going to be element, create element, main. And we'll say main content, class list, add main content. Okay. So let's go ahead and going on here. Yeah, and do that. So now we have 3 variables that each hold their respective elements. So each of these now hold an JavaScript representation of an HTML element. So what we want to do now is we want to say that the app container should append the sidebar container, and the app container should append the main content container. And let's go ahead and style the app container a little bit. And we're going to say that the app container needs to be with, let's say, 800 pixels for now. Say height, we'll give it a fixed height for now, just see what this looks like. And we'll give it a background color. And that's going to be white. And let's go ahead and see where we're at. Nothing. Oh, perfect. That's exactly what I wanted. I'm just kidding. Let's go ahead and see what we did wrong here. We'll go ahead and go to our index HTML. Excuse me, the index.js. Of course. So we have appended everything correctly to our app container, but unfortunately we forgot to append anything to the actual root element. So we need to add the app container here. So that should hopefully take care of our issues. And now we have this white background just spanning the middle of our screen, which is what we wanted. So let's go ahead and see what more we need to do. Obviously, we need to go ahead and create the sidebar. So let's go ahead and actually make a separate file for that. Go ahead and go to our source, make a sidebar JS, and then say const sidebar equals document create element. Let's go ahead and say h1, and then we'll say, just to make sure that this works, we'll say sidebar text content hello world. We love that example. Then we'll export the sidebar, and we'll make that the default export. And we'll go ahead and inside our index.js, we'll import sidebar from sidebar.js. And we'll go ahead and we'll append the sidebar to the sidebar container. So sidebar container and child sidebar. Now, hopefully, if everything goes right, we'll have hello world in our sidebar. And we do. All right. So that's working. This is great. Let's keep going. Before I get started on the sidebar, let's just go ahead and add the appropriate styling to this sidebar container. Going to go ahead and say that the sidebar container is going to have a few classes or properties, and the background color is going to be what we have in our sketch file. So this bluish color right here. Let's go ahead and hit save on that. And we want it to be a width of 30%. And let's go ahead and see what that looks like. All right. So now if we say that, give it a height of 100%, now we have it spanning the entire height of its container. All right, great. Let's go ahead and also do border left, top left radius, thank you, and border bottom left radius. That's going to round it off a little bit along the edges. All right, so the sidebar container is mostly done. So now we can start building the actual sidebar. So let's go ahead and create a div. So the sidebar will be a div, and it will hold some content. So let's see, the sidebar class here is going to be sidebar inner container. All right. Now, what do we need here? If we look at our sketch file, we have a search field, and we have the different contacts here. So that's what we need to create. Now, let's go ahead and do the search field first, and then we'll have a look at the contact section. So const input or search field is going to be document create element. That's going to be a input field. And we'll go ahead and we'll say search field what I want. Name, we're going to call it search. And then we'll do search field that's called placeholder. Search here. What did we say? Search for conversation. That's better. All right. So we'll go ahead and do sidebar And we'll go ahead and child search field. All right. And now we need to worry about the contact section. Actually, let's chuck a class on this as well. Class list and call it sidebar search field placeholder. All right, so now we added that. Let's go ahead and just see what it looks like. So pretty. All right, but it's a start. We're going to go ahead and give the search field some, or the sidebar some padding. So go ahead and go here, say sidebar padding to rem. That's going to be on the inner container. So that'll give us a decent amount of padding. And we'll go ahead and style the search field a little bit as well. Go and make sure we got correct class. And say width 100%, border radius 5%, background color. Let's go ahead and grab that here. And we'll go ahead and say sidebar inner container placeholder. That's gonna be color. Let's put white down for now. Hit refresh. All right. So we'll say border on, and we'll bump this up to 50. We'll give it a padding of 0.5 rems. That's not what I was looking for. All right, better. Still not there yet. Want to, right. Let's make sure we grab the correct class. All right. So let's do 1 rem or 0.5 rems, the top and the bottom, and 1 rem left and right. And let's go ahead and make sure we also put on the box sizing border box. All right. So now we have our search field. And we'll go ahead and say, change the font size there to 0.9 rem. All right. I'm happy with that for now. So we don't have the icon yet, and I think we're going to look at how wide this sidebar is going to be. But for now, I think it's fine. Zoom in a little bit. Well, and now I want to look at the contact section here. So we're going to get started building that out. And for that, we need our data. So that should be interesting. I'm gonna go ahead and go back to the editor. And I find myself wanting to kind of break this up in even more files. So I'm going to make a sidebar folder, and I'm going to move the sidebar in here. I'm going to make sure my editor correctly changed this, and it did. And now what I want to do is I want to able to create the contacts. So let's go ahead and create a new file, and we'll say call this contact card. And what we want to do is define a function. So we want to create a function called render contact card. And that function is going to get the name, the image URL, and let's see what else. It might take a message as well. So if you just look at the sketch file, each contact here has an image, it has a name, it has a message, and it has a timestamp up here in the right hand corner. So I think the timestamp or time here, we're just hard coding that for now, because this is not going to be a fully functional app. We're just going to create kind of like the front end and being able to work from the data. But I put in some timestamps. They're all bogus, so I think we'll just hard code the times here. But we're going to use real data for the contacts otherwise. So let's go ahead and see how we can implement that. So we have the render contact card, and we're going to have a name, a image URL, and a message. And so we want to create the contact card container. So const container equals contact card, document create element contact card. We'll say container. And then we'll go ahead and put down the image, but we'll go ahead and just see. All right, so there's an image. We have a section to the right of the container will contain the image. So we'll create an image. And then to the right of the image, we need another container, because it's going to hold this information right here. So let's go ahead and create that. Create a const inner container. And you might have spotted a slight mistake I have done now. This is the class, so the element is going to be the div. So let's go ahead and rectify that for both of these. This is not going to be contact card image, it's going to be an image tag. So the image will have a class equal to this, and it will have a source equal to the image URL that we get passed in here. All right. So now we need to create this inner container that holds this information here, which is the name and the last message and the timestamp. So we'll create a new div and the inner container class list contact card inner container, and it will have a header. The document create element, and we'll give it an h2. Then the header is going to get a class. It's going to be contact card header. Then we'll have a message body or a message. So I will create const message equals document, create element, message, div. Let's create a paragraph actually. And then the p message text content going to be equal to the message that comes passed in. And this is not going to work because this is shadowing this message here. So let's say message content is going to be the variable name. All right. So we're creating the image, giving it the class and the source. We're creating the inner container, creating the header, and the header needs to have the name, so it needs text content equals name. And we'll create a time equals document create element, and that'll be a span. Say time text content equals. Let's just put down this now. And we'll go ahead and stitch this all up together. So let's think about it. We have the container, and that container is going to have the image, and it's going to have the inner container. And the inner container is going to have the header, and it's going to have the message content. We hit save on that. And now we might be ready to try and dynamically render some of our contacts. And it's not going to be pretty, but hopefully it's going to work. And if it doesn't, we'll just have to fix it. So let's, inside of the sidebar again, let's go ahead and create a contacts container. Sidebar contacts. And its child will be the export from this module. Actually, we'll export the function here. And what we want to do is we want to create document fragment here. Let's keep it simple. And we'll do. All right, so just to walk you through what I'm thinking now. What we want to do is we want to render a new contact card for each entry that we have of contacts. Now, where do we have those contacts? Well, we have them inside of our data file here. So this variable here holds all of the information on our contacts. So we're going to need the contacts and we're going to need the messages. So we're going to do export default from here. And we're going to export user messages contacts. And, or you know what, we're actually going to export each one like this. All right. So let's go ahead and hop over to our sidebar. And we want to import that data. So we'll go ahead and import contacts and messages from, and we will give it our data file. And now if we console log our contacts and messages, let's go ahead and see what we get. File not found. All right. And that makes sense because we changed the location of this file and we didn't restart our server. So we need to go ahead and restart this server. We'll go back here and we still have the same issue. So it looks like our index file is still importing from /sidebar. And if we go back to my previous comment, nothing ever happens unless you actually save your files. So let's go ahead and make sure we save all our files. And we start our server up again. And here we are. And here's our contacts logged out to the console. And here is our messages. So the way it works is that each of these contacts, they have this ID. And this ID is a unique ID for each user. And we're going to be using that ID to look through the object here. And each user is going to have a matching ID to one of these keys in this object. Now, as I said before, some of this is going to fly over your head and we're going to go in depth later. But just know that the way we link these together is by using some combination of words and strings or words and numbers in order to kind of find the connection. So you can think of it as basically just a connection between two things. So let's go ahead and render out these contact cards now. And the way we're going to do it is inside of our sidebar here, we're going to do a loop. So basically, we're just going to go through all of the elements that we have in our contacts, which are, if we take a look, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And now we get to reap the rewards of creating this function because we don't want to write this 8 times. We just want to write it once and then we can use it again. So let's go ahead and say contacts, and then for each contact. Now this here is a variable that's going to represent each entry in the contacts array. So basically what this means is that, all right, for each time we go through this loop, we're going to get a new item, and that item will start out as being the first item here. So first contacts will be this, and then we'll do some work, and then the next time it will be this, and then the next time it'll be this, and it'll keep going like that until we reach the end of this list. So what we can do now is that we can const create, or say, contact card. And what we want to do is we want to call this contact card function. So let's go ahead and import that. And that's going to be from this file. And let's see, we called it render. But it's actually more create. So let's go ahead and change that. We create contact card. And then for each iteration of this loop, we want to create the contact card and we want to give it the contact name, the contact, let's see, what did we say? We'll accept the image URL. Contact image URL. And then the last is the message. You remember I said we needed a link between the messages and the contact? Well, now we're going to use that link and get the last message. So we'll say messages, or message equal messages, and then we'll use the key from the contact. And that's basically, don't worry too much about this, but basically this is from the messages object, get the message key that equals the contact ID of the current iteration. And then we're going to tack this on to select the first item from that list. And it says 0 here. And that's something you just have to get used to with programming. We count from 0 and up. So 0 is actually 1, 1 is actually 2, and so on and so forth. So this just means grab the first message. And then what does the message look like? Well, a message looks like this. So it has content, a timestamp, and an owner. So we need to grab the content from this message. So let's go ahead and say content. And now that'll equal the message that we need. So this now is a variable that holds whatever is returned from this function, which in our case is a HTML structure with the appropriate values injected. So basically we're using the values from our data, we're creating the HTML structure, and now we have a representation of that HTML structure that we need to append to our context container. So down here we'll do context container.append child, and we'll give it the contact card. And finally we'll say sidebar will append the contacts container. All right, so moment of truth here. It broke horribly. And we can't read 0 of undefined. Okay. So this obviously wasn't able to get the item that we wanted. So let's see in our, let's actually log out the console log contact ID just to see where it breaks. So on the first one. All right. Now let's go ahead and check this out. Yeah, that makes sense because, oh, does it? The first key here, yeah, that makes sense. So it looks like I did something wrong and I assigned the key to be the user's key, but it needs to be this contact. And so never mind that for now. We're just going to change this out. And then Hopefully I haven't done any more mistakes and everything will just work magically. And we see that obviously that's not the case. So we need to see what we did wrong, and create contact card is not defined. So that is this function. And looks like you exported that. And yeah, we didn't change the import. So create contact card. Hopefully that's going to take care of some issues. Not everyone, but some of them. So let's see, we failed to execute append child. And parameter 1 is not of type node. Okay, so that means that inside our create function, so this here, we forgot to return a DOM element or representation of a DOM element. So let's go ahead and return the top container. We'll hit refresh again. And here we have our beautiful, beautiful contact list. So let's go ahead and get started on styling this, because it's not exactly lining up with our sketch file yet, but it will. So we'll go to our editor. We'll check out the sidebar first, and then we'll grab the sidebar contacts, and we'll get started styling. Nope, that's the right one. The other one was a file I deleted, and sometimes you're able to magically find your way back to them using text search. But never mind that. We're going to go ahead and give this a padding top of 2 rem. So that'll give us a little bit of space. Let's see. Sidebar contacts. Need to give it a class name. And it looks like I made the same mistake here. It needs to be a div. And class list, add sidebar contacts. All right. Let's see. Class sidebar contacts. Index file. This sidebar contacts. Saved it. And a hard refresh fixes most of my problems. All right. So let's go ahead and see if we can style this contact card container. So what we want to do now is we want to style the contact cards according to our sketch file. So we'll get started on that. And the first element is going to be this contact card container. I'm going to say display flex, align item center. That'll move the 2 elements inside of the contact card container and place them side by side. So we'll have the image on the left hand side and the inner container on the right hand side. So refresh now and you see that it lines up a little bit better. Let's go ahead and give this a padding of 1 rem as well. Then we'll grab the contact card image class, and we will say border radius 25%, 25 for now. And we'll say width 50 pixels, height 50 pixels, margin right 0.5 rem. And all right, let's bring it up to 50. It completely round. And we'll say color is going to be white. All right. So now we're going to grab header. And we're going to say display flex font size 0.9 rem. And we'll grab the message. And also let's go ahead and make sure that we append this time to the header. So header time. And we'll grab the last list, add contact card, this, and we'll say font weight or font size 0.7. We'll go ahead and say we'll give that 0.8, and we'll say content space between. We'll try to do the padding here a little bit lighter, so we'll say like that. Then we'll say margin on the top of bottom will be 0.3 rem and 0. Let's go ahead and reduce this to 40 pixels as well. Just trying to get everything to line up a little bit better. We'll increase the margin, say 0.7, and then we'll go ahead and increase the height of this container as well, or actually leave it like that. We'll have a dynamic height. All right. Yeah, getting there. We might still want to have some padding between the header and the messages, and then do a little bit more on the size, or adjust the font sizes a little bit. So we'll say 0.7 here, and then we'll say margin top 0.2. And we'll give the contact card container a width of 100%. Likewise to the contact card inner container. Okay. And I think we'll reduce this to 35 pixels. Well, and let's see if we can put the margin at 1, just to get a little bit more spacing. Okay, so I think I'm pretty happy with that for now. So let's go ahead and see if we can't just create the header and the rest of this page as well. So let's go ahead and create a new directory in our source folder called header.js. And what we are going to be doing now is we want to have the chat here, and we want to have some buttons up here, and we want to have this border. So let's go ahead and create that. So we'll say const header equals document create element, and we'll call it header, or we'll create the element header, which is actually a valid element, and we'll say chat header. So inside of that header, we'll have an h1. We'll say const header text equals document create element h1, and the header text will be text content. We'll hard code in chat with Chris. All right. So we'll go ahead and see the header and child. We'll give it the header text element. And now we'll go ahead and create a button. So we'll first write it out, and then we'll create a function out of it, because we need 3 of them, and they're all going to look the same. So let's go ahead and say const button document create element button, and then the button will be header button, and we are going to add an SVG inside of there. So let's create an image. Document create element image, the image source, and let's go ahead and give it assets now. Assets, icons, and we'll use this one, image alt, and we're just putting on whatever, the attributes that we need here. So let's append that to the button, and let's see, have the button, we are appending the image, and if we append that to the header now, put that at the bottom here, then we export default header, we go into our text.js, we import the header from header.js, and we want to append that to the main content. So main content append child header, and let's see what we get. A full-blown crash. So header class list is not a function. Well, at least we were able to import it, and I totally agree that's going to be cause us a lot of problems. But and that's also going to cause the same problems. Let's see. All right. So it's there. It's in the wrong place, but it's there. So our side taking up a width of 30%. Our main content, so we say width 70%. And the app container, that needs to be display flex. So if we do that, now we're getting somewhere. So let's go ahead and implement that. CSS, we're going to say, whoops, in the app container, display flex. And then we are going to say that our main, if we go to our index.js and grab the main content class, going to have a width of 70%. That should be it. So now we have the header here, we have the buttons as well, but all right, so we're able to load the icon. We just need to do a few minor adjustments here, but that's fine. Let's go ahead and keep going. Go to our header.js file. And what I want to do is I want to create 3 of these buttons. But, you know, let's go ahead and just make sure that they look decent at least. So grab the header, give that display flex, justify content space between, give it some slight padding as well. And then we have the h1 element, so we'll give that header text, we'll give it a class header text. Font size 1.2 rem. And then the button going to be width 35 pixels, height 35 pixel, border radius 50%. Gonna make it round. Gonna have a background color, and that's going to be defined in our sketch. So e1 db like this. Margin, we're going to give it a margin left and right of 0.2 rem, and then nothing on the top and bottom for now. Then the header button image needs to have a class as well, or we can actually just say header button image with 15 pixels, height 15 pixels. See what that gives us. All right. So let's do border none. And let's say, let's see what's going on. So we have the header and the h1 takes up the full width. So that needs to be display inline block. And I want the, okay, so it has chat header. Not header, it has chat. All right, so that gives us what we need. Let's go ahead and do align items center, just to get them to align in the same height vertically. And then we'll increase the padding to 0.8, and we'll say font weight normal. Okay. And let's actually go ahead and give this header a padding top that matches the sidebar, just so it's going to line up. So I'm going to grab the header, that header, and it's going to be 2rem on the top, 0 or 0.8 on all the other sides except bottom, which will be, should have something like this maybe. So let's do the shorthand instead. It's going to give us a slightly bigger header, but let's roll with it. And if it doesn't work, we'll go ahead and go back and adjust. Let's go ahead and just get on the border bottom, 1 pixel solid. We'll give it light border. All right. So not too happy with the padding bottom, so I'm gonna try and just see what it looks like with just 2 on the top. Let's keep it at 0.8 for now. Yeah. And then we want to go ahead and take a look at creating the other buttons as well. So we're gonna make a function out of this button. So we'll say const create header button, and we'll put all of this in here, and then we'll return the button, and it's going to accept the source and alt. And now we'll also go ahead and create a function out of the header. So go ahead and say create header. Put all of this side of here. Say export default. We'll call create header, so that'll be the export default. The default export will be whatever create header returns. It needs to return the header. So now we don't have any buttons in here anymore, which is a problem. So we're going to go ahead and create a array, and it's going to hold the buttons properties. So the buttons properties are source and alt. So we need the source attribute for the image, and then we need an alt tag. So this is going to be phone, and the source is going to be assets icons phone svg. Then we'll go ahead and we'll duplicate that for the video, and the ellipse is v, and this is going to be video. This, and let's go ahead and make sure. So buttons equals, and then what we want to do is want to do the same thing as we did with the contacts. We're going to loop over the buttons, and we're going to append them all to a button container. So let's go ahead and create a button container. Create element button or header button container, and then sorry, it's going to be div, and this is going to be the class. So button container class list add header button container, and then buttons, which is this variable here holding an array. Say for each button data. And now we are going to create a new button and we're going to pass in button data.source and button data.alt. So this function expects the source attribute and the alt attribute in order to create the button. And we have those defined here in an array. So we're just looping over every entry in this array, and then we're passing through the data to the create header button, which will take that data and it'll go ahead and create a new button and return it out. So now this variable here holds a new button representation, and we need to add it to the button container. So we'll do button container, append child, and we'll give it the new button. And then we'll say, instead of button here, we'll say button container. So let's check our browser. And now we have our buttons. And let's go ahead and see. Yeah, let's increase the margin a little bit. Our CSS. So say 0.5, say 30, 30, say 12.5, 12.5 down here. All right, and I think I'm going to reduce the size of header text like this. All right, so now we have to take a look at the next section, which is going to be the message section here. So that's going to be the main content area of this application. Let's go ahead and see how we can build that out. And that's going to start with a new folder in source, and we'll see, we'll call it messages. And we'll create a new file called messages.js. So if we go back to our index file for a second, we have this main content container. It now has the header, and we want it to also append the main content messages area that we are going to build up here. So we'll build this as a function as well. So we'll say create main content, and that's going to be a function. And we'll make sure to export the function. And for now, we'll just call it here. So we return whatever this function returns. So let's see what we need right now. So first of all, we need to know which user is selected. We haven't built that functionality yet. So what we're going to do is we're going to cheat a little bit to start, and we're going to grab the ID of this user, and we are going to get the user and the messages, and then we're going to render those out here. So let's get started on that. So if we go to our data.js and we have this user here, we're going to say grab this ID and we'll just create a const current user and we'll paste in this ID. And now we'll go ahead and import the data as well. Get the messages and the contacts from our data file. So let's go ahead and first of all create a main content container. Say container equals document, create element, main content. Let's go ahead and go to our index.js file and make sure we don't have a main content container. I swear I'm gonna make this mistakes a ton of times more today. So container, class list, add main content container. Okay. So now that we have that, let's see what we want to have as well inside of here. So basically, we want this to be a flex container, and it's going to hold all of the messages from the current user and obviously the messages that we type in. So let's see how we can do that. We know that we have a current user, which is this one. So if we go ahead and grab the messages from the current user and we console log that out, and we go ahead and we say what did we do here? Yeah, we called it anything. So import main content from messages. Let's call it messages. And we'll say main content and child messages. All right. So now we should be able to crash the application horribly. And we made a mistake in our messages. And we're trying to create a console log constant, which is never going to work in any universe. Yeah, that's fair enough, because we're not returning anything from the function. But what's important here is that we can see that we have the messages from the current user, and that's great. So what we want to do is we want to loop over the messages. We want to create a message. So if we look at this, we have the current user messages, and then we have our messages, which is basically so let's call this here the contact user messages, and this will be the user messages or our messages, or what we want to call that. So basically we need a way to figure out which message is which, and luckily each message has a owner property. So if we look at the data for a message, we see that we have the content and we have the owner, which is an ID. So what we can do is we can check the ID towards the current user, and if it matches the current user ID, then we know that it's a message from the contact, and if not, we will render our own messages. So I know that as I'm saying this, I feel like it doesn't make any sense, but I'll just code it out and then hopefully it'll make a little more sense. So we'll say const create contact message. That's going to be a function. And let's return the container here just so we have a element that doesn't crash our application. And we'll say const create user message, which is going to be ourselves. All right. Perfect. So just going to refresh to get our application back. And now we still have the messages and the app isn't crashing. So let's see how we can make this happen. I want to go to the main content, and we'll create a variable here that holds the messages. Current chat. So that's going to be the messages for the current chat. And current chat for each message. We are going to do a few checks here. So if the message owner is equal to the current user, then we want to create a message variable here. Then we want the message variable to equal create contact message. And if not, we want the message to be equal to create user message. And then finally, we are going to do container and child message. All right. So now we need to create each message in these functions, and we also need to pass in the message here. So let's go ahead and create the contact message first. So that's going to be this section right here. So it's going to have an image and a message next to it. So we'll go ahead and we'll get the user. So we'll need to do a function called getUser, and we're going to get it based on the ID. So let's call it getContact, and we're going to pass in the ID, and then we're going to do contacts, which is the array of contacts, and we want to do find, and we want to match the contact ID with the ID that passed in. So basically, we're looping over every single contact in our data set. So every contact here, we're matching on this property here. And if it matches the current user, then we want to return the object. And in this case, we're going to return the first object here. So hopefully that'll work just fine. And the reason we need to get the contact is because we need the image URL that exists on this object in order to properly render the image. So let's go ahead and grab the image or the contact. So here we're going to accept the message, and we're going to say const ID equals message owner. We're going to say const content equals message content. And now we're going to say contact equals get contact. And we'll pass in the ID. And now we can start building our message. So we'll create a container, create element, and that's going to be a div. We'll say container class list add, and we'll give that a class of contact message. Let's prefix that with chat. And now let's see. We need the image, so we'll do image document create element image, and the image source will be equal to the contact image URL, and the alt be equal to contact name, the image class will be equal to, let's chat contact. Okay, now we have the image, and then we're going to need a message box like this, but there's really no difference between the message box here and here, so let's go and farm that out to another function. So we'll say const create message box, and we'll go ahead and say box document create element, and what we want to do is we want to say div, and we'll go ahead and we'll accept the content and a class name property, or class name, and box class list add, and that's going to be the class name we pass in, and the box text content will be equal to the content we pass in. And now we want to do message box, and we'll call the create messenger box function. We'll pass in the content, and we'll give it a class name of chat contact message box, and we'll go ahead and we'll append all of that to the container here. So container append child, and the first thing will be the image, and the container is also going to have the message box. All right, so that's going to give us what we need for the contact message, I hope and think. Let's go ahead and create the user message as well, and that's simply going to be we return create message box, we'll pass in the message content, and we'll give this a chat user message box class. All right, let's go ahead and check, see what we broke. Identifier message has already been declared. That's completely true. So inside of our create contact message, we're accepting the message as parameter, and then no, not here, but inside of create main content, we have messages here. Okay, so we're trying to do this, which won't work. Call this created. Then we'll have to swap out these. Now we have a new error. Image class list, not a function. Totally true. And we can't append a pen child. So container append child message box. And we are not returning anything from here, so that's not surprising. Let's see. Soon we'll get to the bottom of these errors, hopefully. So container append child created message. We have an issue still. That issue is here, so created message. So let's see. Create user message. Let's go ahead and console log what this is. And it's undefined. That's because we are not returning anything from here. And there we go. Right, so now we have it rendered out. Now we need to figure out how to style it. And let's go ahead and just take a look at our sketch file. That's a good start. And now let's go to our CSS and start styling these different messages. And I think we'll begin with the main content container. So we're going to grab that, go to our index, yes, say display flex, say flex direction is column. And that's not going to do anything. We still have the same, but it's going to set us up for success when we start styling these message boxes. So let's go ahead and get started on the chat contact message. So we'll grab the class, we'll go to our CSS file, we'll say playFlex on that, and say margin right is going to be auto. And then we'll grab the chat contact image. It's going to be width 35, height 35, and let's say line item center here to align them vertically, border radius 50%, and now we want to grab the chat message box. For the contact, I want to grab the color from here. And we'll say background color for this message box. It's going to be this color. Border radius be 3 pixels. See what that does. Sweet. And the max width 300 pixels, I think. Color will be white. Padding will be 0.5 rems. The margin right here will be 0.5 rem for now. Okay. Let's go ahead and give it a font size of 0.9. And we'll give the main content container 2 rem padding. and we'll give the chat contact message a margin top and bottom of 1 rem, like that. And now we need to take a look at the user message. So chat user message. And it's going to have a lot of the same properties as this one. We can pop that in here. And then do chat user message box. And the background color of this will be slightly different. It will be F1, and then the color will be 1D. D1D. Let's go ahead and pop in the color. We'll say margin, right, left, auto. Sweet. So now we kind of have like the basic makeup of the chat going. Still think that this is slightly too big, and I think they need to be font weight. Is it normal? I think that looks better. Slightly smaller, but it's fine. All right, so we come pretty far right now, and it's a long video, but I think it's useful to kind of go through this stuff before we start talking about the different concepts. But let's go ahead and add one final piece, and once that's done, we'll take a look at a few basic JavaScript concepts, and then this will be an application that we'll come back to and build out with functionality as we go along. But let's do one more thing, and what I want to do is I want the input field at the bottom here. So we're gonna go ahead and create that as well, and I think that's going to be in the messages. Section. So I'm going to create a function here called create chat input, and I'll say const input equals document create element input. The input name equals chat message, and we'll say input class name going to be chat input message. And then this needs to be in a container, so we'll create a container for that as well. Document create element div container class list add chat container. Then we're going to need a button. That's going to be document create element button. Now we'll say text content equals send. Say button class list adds say chat button. And we'll say container send child put, and the input will get a placeholder text. Right message here. So container has now the input, and then the container needs the button. and we will turn container. Let's go ahead and create the input here. So that input, and we'll send the input to the container. So that should give us a input down here, and we want to kind of have it placed all the way down and spanning the entire width of this container. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna say that we want to grab the main content, and we're gonna give that a position relative. And then for this input container, we'll give it a position of absolute, and we'll give it a bottom property of 0. Let's see what that did. Okay, so height 100%. Did that fix it? Well, yes and no. So let's go ahead and so the main content container. All right, so it has a height of 100%, but it also includes the header now. So looks like the header pushes it down a little bit. All right, I'm gonna troubleshoot that a little bit later. For now, just gonna do a light. I'm gonna do something. I'm gonna just try to make this work. So basically, we have the input here, and what I want is to have the input span the entire width and be at the bottom of this container. So let's see how we can make that happen. To have the input, I'm gonna position it absolutely. Well, you know, we're actually gonna just cheat a little bit now. Place it correct position, and then we'll alter it later. So main content will be relative. That input container will be here. So bottom 0. Then we'll give the main content container a width of 100% minus 60 pixels. Or height, sorry. So main content height be calc 100% minus pixels. Okay. So now we have that here. That's going to be bottom 0, left 0, right 0. Let's see, that spans the entire width. So let's copy that over. And we'll grab the input So this, and we'll give that a class here. Say padding 0.5 rem. Width is going to be 80%. And let's make it 85. And we'll give it a border on. And this will have a border top pixel solid F1 on F1. All right. And the button, going to be styled as well. Go ahead and message it. We'll grab the chat input button, the index CSS file, say width 15%, background color going to be from Sketch, and the color will be white, and the width and height, or the height will be 100%, border none. All right, so let's go ahead and give this a fixed height, 45 pixels. And if we just want to hack this a little bit, go ahead and just that height calculation. And there we have it. A single page app written entirely in vanilla JavaScript from Sketch. Still lacking a little bit in the functionality, and I want to bake that in at a later point in time, but I think we have enough now to dive into some of the basic JavaScript concepts and use this app as a starting point for understanding those concepts. So I want to thank you for staying with me this long and watching kind of this intro to JavaScript. I know it was fast. I know that I glossed over a lot of things, and I know that some things might be really hard to understand right now, and I totally get that. But I think, this is going to give you a solid foundation once we go through the basics and you're able to actually tie it to a real example that you've been with from the start. So thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next video where we'll start going over some of the JavaScript basics. So have a nice evening, and I'll see you later.